The GOP picks its new leaders in Congress. Welcome to Faith Nation. I'm Jenna Browder. Today, Senate leadership for the next congressional term was elected. Capitol Hill correspondent Abigail Robertson is on the Hill, and she joins us now. She was there for the vote. Abigail, not a lot of surprises, but some changes for sure.
Yes. Well, in Senate Democratic leadership, we're not seeing a whole lot of change. But in the Republicans, they've changed a few people. Majority Leader Mitch McConnell will remain in his position, but they will be replacing their Majority Whip since their current Majority Whip, Senator John Cornyn, has served the maximum amount of terms in that position. So he will be replaced with Senator John Thune of South Dakota. They've also elected a new President pro tempore of the Senate, Chuck Grassley. He will be replacing retiring Senator Orrin Hatch, so that will make him the new third in line in the presidential succession. And Senate Republicans have added a woman to their leadership, Senator Joni Ernst of Iowa. So definitely a few changes made there.
Yeah, and House leadership for the GOP was also chosen today. What can you tell us about that?
Well, the current Majority Leader Kevin McCarthy just defeated Congressman Jim Jordan by a vote of 159 to 43 for the Minority Leader for the next Congress. But other than that, House Republican leadership will pretty much remain the same, except obviously with their current leader, Speaker Ryan, retiring next year. But other than that, Steve Scalise will return as Majority Whip, and we'll see a lot of the same people in their positions.
And when will the next Speaker of the House be determined, Abigail?
That vote will happen in about 50 days. And so right now it's looking like it will be Nancy Pelosi, but 50 days is a long time for an opponent to emerge, and she possibly could see a challenge for that position.
All right, 50 days, no doubt, a long time. All right, thank you, Abigail.
Thank you, Jenna.
Well, David Brody joins us now. David, what do you think? McConnell and the agenda.
Well, I got to tell you, it's going to be interesting because Mitch McConnell, being still in the majority here, but he did a lot with judges in the first couple years, which was obviously a good thing for the space. Having said that, now he's going to continue on that same venue. And the good news for Senate Republicans and conservatives is that you don't need the House for judges. So that will be on the top of the list, and he'll continue to do that. And so that'll be a good thing. As for some of the other agenda items, you're looking at, obviously, health care. They'll maybe try to not repeal and replace, not do the big enchilada, but maybe do kind of a little bit here, a little bit there. We'll see. The bottom line is it's a House divided. I don't just mean the Senate. You got the House literally being in Democrats' control. So McConnell's got an uphill climb. But look, they got Kavanaugh and Gorsuch through, and that's a big deal.
Yeah, they're feeling pretty good about that still.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, in the House, Majority Leader Kevin McCarthy, he's now going to be the Minority Leader. Talk about that and kind of the changes that he'll be facing in that new role.
Right, as we talked about, Kevin McCarthy elected as the Minority Leader. He's very popular within the caucus. Here's the issue. You've got the Freedom Caucus, very conservative folks there. Hey, and by the way, that's some of our video that we shot out there in California. I just want to say, Dennis, our photographer, shooting that video. But look, we got to know him out there in California because he is very personable. So they like him in the caucus, and Donald Trump likes him, more importantly. The Freedom Caucus, however, thinks he's a little bit too moderate. So now we have to see in the minority how he kind of maneuvers what Trump wants, what the Freedom Caucus wants, and what some of the moderates in the party want. And I think that'll be the challenge for him.
Then there's talk of some Democrats not supporting Nancy Pelosi for Speaker.
Yeah, well, look, it's Nancy Pelosi, and she is an icon. Love her or hate her, she's an icon for sure. It's going to be really hard to do that. Having said that, there's at least 10 to 15 or so Democrats who have actually said, no, we're not going to support her for Speaker. She'll need 218 votes. As Abby said, the vote is in, 50 days or so. She'll probably get the votes. I don't think that's the issue. Having said that, be aware of a letter coming from some of these disgruntled Democrats against Pelosi who are going to say, we don't want her as Speaker. That'll be the headline going forward.
All right. David Brody, thank you very much.
Thanks, Jenna.
Well, over at the White House, a massive legal battle is brewing, and the subpoenas are coming for President Trump and his administration. As Democrats get ready to take control of the House, they are putting together a long list of everything they want to investigate.
We are not scattershot. We are not doing any investigation for a political purpose, but to seek the truth. So I think a word that you could describe about how Democrats will go forward in this regard is we will be very strategic.
House Minority Leader Nancy Pelosi, who hopes to take over as Speaker, says her party will be strategic. but some new signs suggest that may not be the case. Axios reports Democrats are loading a subpoena cannon with a list of at least 85 investigations they want to pursue.
Well, I think the Democrats are very much at risk of overplaying their hand here. I think the American people are going to suffer from investigation fatigue.
Stephen Moore, an economist with the Heritage Foundation and former Trump economic advisor, tells CBN News he's actually glad Democrats will have control of the House.
I was kind of quietly hoping that Democrats would take the House and the Republicans would keep the Senate, because I felt like if Republicans controlled every lever of power going into the 2020 election and anything goes wrong, then what party would you possibly have to blame but the Republicans? Now, if things go wrong, Trump can say, look, it's because the Pelosi Democrats are blocking what I'm trying to do.
The Axios list covers just about everyone and everything close to Trump from day one of his presidency. Many Democrats are talking about impeachment, as the incoming House Oversight Chairman, Representative Jerry Nadler, would be in charge of that. But he says his #1 priority is Robert Mueller's Russia investigation.
Right now, our top priority is to protect the Mueller investigation, to protect the integrity of that investigation from the White House attempt to stifle it and to interfere with it.
The man in charge of the investigation, Acting Attorney General Matt Whitaker, will be among the first called to testify.
We will make sure that Matt Whitaker immediately, one of our first orders of business will be to invite him and, if necessary, to subpoena him to appear before the committee.
It does violence to the Constitution and the vision of our founders to appoint such a person in such a manner to be the chief legal officer in our country.
And there's Nancy Pelosi again. David joins me and now again. David, after midterm elections like this, is it common to see investigations into an administration?
Well, it's common, but to a smaller scale. A few. We saw this with the Obama administration, with Benghazi and a few others. So Republicans were very much on the investigation trail there. The difference here is that Democrats are in overload for sure. Look, I mean, they're looking at maybe potentially the hush money payments that we've heard about, Stormy Daniels. They're looking at the tax returns. They're looking at, obviously, Russia interference. That'll be the big one as you go down the line. And so there's, as you point out in that piece, there's a litany of investigations. And I think Stephen Moore is exactly right here, that the Democrats are very much in danger of overplaying their hand here, because they have to understand that at some point they're going to look obstructionist if they continue to go down this avenue.
Yeah, and Stephen Moore, he said that the main thing, if there's anything he's concerned about in this long list of investigations, he mentioned the Russia probe. David, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I agree with that. I think the broader issue here is that, look, these investigations turn up potential new facts. Look what happened. Remember Hillary Clinton's email server? That all started with the House investigation in Benghazi. So if the House never investigated Benghazi, the Hillary Clinton email server wouldn't have become a big story in the 2016 campaign. So therefore, what Trump and the administration have to worry about here is, what will these investigations unveil? Then the media will pick it up. It'll become the Gang of 500, and the media will start to, become that echo chamber. And all of a sudden it becomes a storyline that Trump is going to have to really watch himself against as he prepares for a 2020 presidential run.
Yeah, and Stephen Moore, he said that he doesn't think ultimately that President Trump that they'll find anything that's incriminating, but possibly embarrassing, minor misconducts and that kind of thing within his administration. But David, what are your thoughts on impeachment? There are some Democrats who are all for it, thinking they need to go for that, play to their base. Others want to shy away and kind of wait. Yeah, well, if you do a truth serum injection into the entire Democratic Party, of course they want to go for the impeachment. But they also understand the political lay of the land. And so I think they will hold off. However, having said that, it depends what the Mueller investigation finds. That's what they're waiting for. They're hoping for a smoking gun. If they get a smoking gun, I think they could move forward, Jenna. Here's the problem with impeachment. When Richard Nixon was impeached, remember, he never went through an impeachment trial. He never got to the whole House and then Senate for the trial. He had lost his base. He had lost the Republican Party. Donald Trump hasn't lost the Republican Party so far, at least. And so as long as Donald Trump continues to keep a base of support, then it's going to be very difficult to try and impeach a relatively popular president within his base. And I think that's the difference, because then you're going to have a revolt on your hands, and then it's going to get really, really ugly. David, with all of these legal battles coming up, do you think the White House is ready? Do they have the legal structure in place? Well, here's the legal structure. Donald Trump.
And Donald Trump tells his lawyers what he wants the legal structure to be. So I guess the answer is we don't know. We know Jay Sekulow and a few others are on the team. But then again, they're pretty much taking orders from the commander-in-chief, or in this case, the lawyer-in-chief. And so the answer is we don't know. What we do know is that on Twitter, that's where the legal strategy will play out, which drives them nuts, because don't play out your legal strategy in 140 characters or less.
David, thanks so much.
Thanks, Jenna.
Well, a new FBI report shows hate crimes against Jews increased by 17% in 2017. That is no surprise after last month's shooting in a Pittsburgh synagogue. But what is surprising is the growing amount of anti-Semitism on college campuses. Paul Strand reports.
Some folks hear about anti-Semitism here in America and they tend to blame people on the right. But often it's coming from the left, and sometimes right here on college campuses.
The truth is that anti-Semitism has been on the rise across the board. The Anti-Defamation League talks about how there's been an uptick, I think it's 57% increase, but on the university campuses, just in the last year alone, it's over 80%.
For example, UCLA is taking heat for hosting the Students for Justice in Palestine annual conference. As philanthropist Adam Milstein pointed out in a tweet, its members use words like, "Let's stuff some Jews in the oven," "Kill all the Jews," "Don't hesitate to slash their throats." Aliza Lewin of the Brandeis Center speaks of Jewish students afraid to wear shirts showing Hebrew.
Because when they wear Hebrew t-shirts, they feel that it makes them a target.
Being accosted by other students and calling them Zionist baby killers and that sort of thing.
Professor David Bernstein at George Mason University's law school writes about anti-Semitism. Some of it comes from Middle Eastern Muslim students now studying here.
Anti-Semitism is common and unobjectionable in the Middle East. Rates of anti-Semitism in Syria, the Palestinian territories, Jordan, Egypt are 80% plus.
And the Jews get judged for their defense of the Jewish homeland, Israel.
If you demonize Israel, if you think that Israel is so awful that it should be the one country singled out for sanctions and boycotts and all that, then you say to yourself, well, who's defending this evil country? And not surprisingly, the people who are most active in defending Israel on many campuses are Jews, so there must be something wrong with the Jews.
Lewin says people on campus who say they're just anti-Zionist, not anti-Jew, don't understand how crucial Zion is to most Jews.
The special feeling about Zion, about Israel, is an integral part of Jewish identity. There's a deep spiritual, religious connection to Israel that predates the creation of the modern state of Israel.
Some folks dream that things like racism and anti-Semitism may just fade away as civilization progresses. But if it's starting to bubble up on college campuses and among the young, maybe it's a dream that has to be put off for a while. Paul Strand, CBN News, reporting from the George Mason Law School.
Right, thank you, Paul. Well, criminal justice reform is taking center stage in Washington this week. Many suspected the issue would be tackled after the midterms, and this week reform advocates have been making their voices heard.
There's no doubt, if you look at the numbers, that whites and blacks use drugs at the same levels. But if you look at the rates of incarceration, people of color are incarcerated at much higher rates. People who are lower income are incarcerated at much higher rates. Is it racism? Possibly, probably. Is it also just the whole factor of, people in suburbs are less likely to get caught? But for whatever the reason is, our justice system has not been blind. It has not been treating people exactly the same in terms of possession of drugs or even sale of drugs. And that's an issue that, I feel passionately about. I'm a conservative, but I always say, big government really hurts people from all walks of life. I think a lot of times when progressives hear conservatives talk about big government, they think we're just concerned about taxes or overregulation or business or economics. But really, this is a civil rights issue.
And tomorrow on Faith Nation, Amber Strong will bring us an in-depth look at the push for criminal justice reform and the support the measure is getting from unlikely allies from across all sides of the aisle. Well, President Trump is setting records by approving a $716 billion defense budget this year.
I've rebuilt and am in the process of rebuilding our military. We're going to have very shortly, we're going to have the strongest military our country has ever had.
But a new report to Congress is sounding alarms that the U.S. is losing its military edge, warning the country could lose possibly a war if it broke out with China or Russia. The bipartisan National Defense Strategy Commission issued the report. The commission includes 32 recommendations on why the U.S. is losing its edge, including a lack of funding and a lack of innovation. Well, John Hahn served as former Vice President Dick Cheney's national security advisor, and he's now a senior counsel at the Foundation for Defense of Democracies, and he joins us now. John, thanks so much for being here.
Thank you, Jenna.
Defense Secretary James Mattis said he was humbled by the largest defense budget in history, but now it sounds like it wasn't enough money. What does that mean for the future of the military, John?
Well, this is a very alarming report, Jenna. It basically says that if the U.S. is not able to sustain the kind of defense increases that President Trump allowed for 2018, 2019 over the next decade or so, the United States risks real strategic insolvency and the danger that we could lose regional wars in critical theaters of operations, including a possible conflict with China over Taiwan or Russia over the Baltic states.
Now, this report out by a commission of bipartisan experts says the U.S. would suffer unacceptably high casualties and even lose a war against, say, China or Russia. How dire, John, is this warning?
It's a real dire warning. This is a flashing red light to the American president and the American Congress that they really need to pay attention to the question of whether or not we've got enough resources, if we know how to fight and win these wars with major peer competitors in China and Russia in particular, who have spent the last several decades building up capabilities to challenge and defeat the United States in areas that have been key to American security and prosperity now for several decades.
And the report did agree with the goal of the president to massively overhaul the military, but said that the overhaul wasn't happening quick enough. Is it possible to speed that up at all?
It's very difficult, I think, particularly now we do have a Democratic Congress coming into place, being able to sustain these kinds of defense increases. The commission actually talks about 3 to 5% increases year over year. That's going to be, I think, very, very difficult without some major rejiggering of our entire American budget.
Yeah, John, what is the solution then?
Well, the solution, I think, is for the president and the Congress to figure out a way to get together to understand the kind of national emergency and challenges that we face and figure out a bipartisan way forward to meet what, after all, is the first obligation of our national government under the Constitution, which is to provide for our common defense.
John Hahn, thank you so much. Good to see you, sir.
Thank you.
Well, up next, the latest on the deadly wildfires devastating parts of California. California's governor is calling on the National Guard to help search for victims of those deadly wildfires. At least 50 people have been killed in the flames, and now survivors are trying to figure out how to start rebuilding their lives. Charlene Aaron has the story.
The Camp Fire in Northern California has scorched at least 130,000 acres. Thousands of firefighters are still fighting what is now the deadliest and costliest fire in state history. Many residents narrowly escaping. This woman crying and praying as she drove through flames near Malibu.
Oh my God, please God.
Firefighters are carrying out an aerial assault on the Woolsey Fire in the south. In the devastated town of Paradise in the north, it's a fight to recover.
I should have been there.
Hundreds of people are unaccounted for. Friends and relatives of the missing have been calling hospitals, shelters, even the coroner's office in search of loved ones.
I think that there's hope, but also we have to prepare ourselves for the worst.
A message board at a shelter is filled with photos of the missing, as well as pleas for information. I hope you are okay, reads one handwritten note. A family of 19 with no place to go setting up tents in a parking lot.
We'll rebuild one day, but it's definitely been tough,
More than 8,000 structures and 345 square miles of land have burned, while officials warn of howling winds that could spawn more monster blazes with the slightest spark. Charlene Aaron, CBN News.
Still ahead on Faith Nation, how one group is working to honor lawmakers who serve the country and serve God. A number of ministries are focused on encouraging and helping Christians to run for public office. One that's been at it for decades here in Washington now finds itself at the center of the battle for America's soul. Senior Washington correspondent Jennifer Wishon joins us to explain.
The D. James Kennedy Center for Christian Statesmanship has one goal: to equip Christian leaders for battle in the public arena.
We train them in the U.S. Constitution, in biblical worldview, political philosophy, and then we have classes on public speaking, how to do media interviews, how to handle ambush interviews, all the things that they're going to face out there on the campaign trail.
Ray Gonzalez completed the program and just ran for Congress in Texas.
I believe that one of the things that has driven a lot of folks to the polls is seeing just how far our country has veered from biblical principles. So to fix that, the only thing left for voters to do is to go to the polls. But the one thing that those of us who have been called to serve can do is to actually run for office.
Each year, the center awards a leader who lives life in a way that honors God. And Tuesday, that distinction went to Oklahoma Senator Jim Inhofe for making his life count for Christ. Oklahoma's junior Senator James Lankford previously received the award.
It's very interesting for me to be able to hear some people say, well, if you come from a biblical worldview, then really that's a ministry or that's private life. That doesn't really spill over into your public life. That's not only contrary to who we are as Americans, that's contrary to what we believe even as Christians. 36 of the 39 books of the Old Testament were written to, by, or about a political leader. A third of the New Testament was written to a political leader. Saul's mission when he became Paul was to go to the Jews, the Gentiles, and the Gentile kings. This political engagement in this ministry to people in politics, as well as engaging in what is our culture, should be a part of who we are.
Having people with a biblical worldview, people who know how to articulate what the scriptures say, and to be able to present that to others, and to be able to defend their positions in that way, we need more of that in this country.
And the center is accepting Christian students to begin classes in January, February, and March of 2019. Jennifer Wishon, CBN News, Washington.
Thank you, Jennifer, and thank you so much for joining us this evening. That is it for Faith Nation tonight. We'll see you right back here again tomorrow.